Christopher Nolan has marked himself as the king of Hollywood blockbuster, and the Odyssey proves yet again whatever he touches turns to gold. I walked out of the cinema asking myself one question. Has he just made the best film of his career? After spending nearly 3 hours in the Odyssey, I don't think it's simply because this is Nolan's biggest film. I think it might be the culmination of everything he's been building towards for almost 25 years. Nolan has embraced the ability to tell stories about drastically different worlds, whether it's superheroes, space exploration, corporate espionage, or even World War II. However, the Odyssey feels like a significant departure for him, as he adapts an ancient Greek epic, spending approximately $250 million to do it, and to top it all off, shot the entire thing on IMAX cameras, making it the first full feature film shot entirely that way. I should preface this review by stating I have never been more immersed in a film than this movie. Nolan has a way of bringing you into the story, and this time he accomplished it with the sound design. It was perhaps the loudest movie I have ever seen in my life, yet it felt justified. A final thought before I begin. Hollywood has spent nearly $600 million just trying to bring Matt Damon home, whether it be in Saving Private Ryan, The Martian, Interstellar, and now The Odyssey. This guy can't quite catch a break. Saying that his last name spelled backwards is no mad, so it all seems to make sense, doesn't it? Homer's nearly 3,000-year-old text, and Nolan's adaptation of that text focuses on Odysseus, played by Matt Damon. He is the king of Ithaca, who after laying siege to Troy alongside fellow king Agamemnon, embarks on a 10-year long journey home, back to his wife Penelope, played by Anne Hathaway, and son Telemachus, played by Tom Holland. The film begins with an all too familiar image, the Trojan horse, planting us right in the midst of the fall of Troy. However, don't begin to question your own sanity or memory of the original text. As we know in Homer's text, the Odyssey actually begins years later with Odysseus trapped on Calypso's island, with the Trojan horse only being described in flashbacks. Nolan takes liberties in his script, but they aid in expanding the overall story and tales of Odysseus's deeds. On the surface, the film is about a legendary king and warrior, a wife who awaits his return while fending off suitors who, through Zeus's law, seek shelter in Ithaca, eating their food, drinking their wine, and desperately hoping that Penelope will finally give up on waiting for Odysseus' return and marry one of them. As his journey home progresses, conflict and obstacles slow down and derail the journey. From a Cyclops to Circe to giants and sirens, there is not a single moment in this film that you can breathe. The only respite seemingly coming from Ithaca itself, as Penelope weaves and unweaves, awaiting her husband's return. Arguably one of the standout performances in the film is by Samantha Morton, who brings Circe to the big screen. Circe could have easily been reduced to little more than a mythical obstacle on Odysseus' journey home, yet Samantha Morton's performance is anything but that. She makes Circe feel less like a villain standing in the way and more like an ancient force of nature. Perhaps the most disturbing sequence plays out on Circe's island as we witness her turn the soldiers into pigs, which I should add was done entirely with practical effects, and if you've seen the film, you'll understand how shocking that is. The entire island feels tangible in a way that's becoming increasingly rare in fantasy cinema. More importantly, Circe isn't there simply to delay Odysseus, but instead redirect the journey, forcing him to stop surviving and start understanding what it will take to actually make it home, which will involve taking accountability for all the lives he has taken in the name of power and loyalty. One of the biggest changes Nolan makes is with Athena, played by Zendaya. Rather than simply appearing as the goddess of wisdom, guiding Odysseus home, she takes the form of a young girl killed during the siege of Troy. It's a subtle but incredibly effective choice because she becomes far more than a divine guide. She becomes the physical embodiment of Odysseus' guilt. She forces Odysseus to confront not only the people he has killed, but the men he led into battle and the consequences of the decisions he has made. In many ways, she becomes his conscience. Matt Damon is sensational in this film, but gives perhaps one of his quietest performances. Odysseus carries the majority of his burden through his expression, not so much his words, and over the course of the movie we follow him over 10 long years on his journey home. He becomes exhausted carrying weight of every decision that got him there. The monsters, the storms, and the gods may seem like obstacles standing between Odysseus and Ithaca, but Nolan makes it clear that the greatest obstacle in the film is Odysseus himself. Nearly every hardship he faces can be traced back to a choice he made. Whether it's his pride after defeating Polyphemus, the decisions that cost the lives of his crew, or his ability to let go of the man he became during the war. The journey home becomes something he is forced to earn, and before he can return to his love, he must first have to confront the version of himself that built the Trojan horse and raided Troy. What is remarkable is that when Odysseus finally reaches Ithaca, the question isn't whether he survived the monsters or conquered the sea, it was whether the man who has returned is still the man Penelope fell in love with. The man who carried her pin across the seas. After everything he has seen and everything he has done, can he ever truly be that person again? Christopher Nolan has argued that practical filmmaking creates a level of authenticity that CGI really struggles with, and this has never been more apparent than in The Odyssey. While superhero films rely heavily on green screens and special effects, Nolan's action sequences feel chaotic, utterly chaotic, because they actually exist. Nolan had full ships built and filmed at sea, which for those who have seen the movie might feel very alarming. They were shot on real open water around Greece, Sicily, and Malta, meaning the unrelenting action we see on screen was quite genuine. You can feel the movement of the sea on screen because the ships were actually battling it. Perhaps the most intense and impressive sequence took place in a cave as Odysseus and his soldiers come face to face with the Cyclops and son of Poseidon, Polyphemus. Instead of making the Cyclops entirely CGI, Nolan used a huge practical puppet as the foundation, using CGI only to enhance his facial expressions and scale. This made the encounter feel way more tangible rather than cartoonish. By shooting so much in camera, you don't just watch Odysseus' journey home, you feel like you're surviving it alongside him. If there's one aspect of the film that divided people, it was the sound design, as I mentioned earlier. This was without a doubt the loudest film I have ever experienced, and I don't quite know how to put into words how loud it was. Every crashing wave, clap of thunder, or screeching Cyclops, which was the most disturbing part, it demands your attention. There were moments where the sheer force of the sound almost became overwhelming. At one point, specifically in the cave, I did have to plug my ears, but thankfully other people did too, so I didn't feel utterly nuts. The sea almost feels like a living creature. The storms are violent, and the world constantly reminds you just how insignificant one man is against nature and the gods. I will say, this was perhaps the shortest 3 hours I've ever experienced. With the loss of the world weighing on me as I left the cinema, I simply didn't want to leave. I just wanted to keep watching more. Despite not being as complex as Nolan's other films or relying on big plot twists to further the story, it is perhaps the most emotionally mature film he has done to date. It is a story about guilt and the task of trying to become the person you were before war changed you forever. Nolan reminds us that the greatest battles aren't fought with swords, facing off against giants or cyclopses, but instead they're fought within ourselves. So, is The Odyssey Nolan's best film to date? For me, yes it is. It is the easiest 5 stars I've ever given on Letterboxd, I'll tell you that. And the more I think about this film, the more I love it. It almost feels like a culmination of everything he has spent the last 25 years exploring. Homer wrote The Odyssey nearly 3,000 years ago, yet its central question remains timeless. Can someone ever truly return home after everything they've done? Nolan doesn't just ask the question, he makes you carry it all the way home alongside Odysseus. Let me know if you've seen The Odyssey and what your thoughts and feelings were about it. Do you also think it's Nolan's best film? I mean, me saying it is probably going to anger a few people. He makes sensational films. The Dark Knight was my favorite for the longest time. Interstellar, Memento, The Prestige. Nolan is a brilliant director, but for me, The Odyssey stands out above the rest. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.